Mic check. Yes. Yes, that's Food Fight. First of all, I just want to thank Linda, Darius. I want to thank Bonfire Heights. I was noticing when I was, we doing the interviews, it's becoming really clear that really who was transformed deeply from this was me. That the ability to, see myself that much clearer through the reflections of everyone else in this space and just the synchronicities that abounded. So I'm just really thankful for that. And more bonfires go on, you know what I mean? Yes, so yeah, this video, Food Fight, sort of kick-started S.O.S. Juice. S.O.S. Juice, systematic system juices. Sort of, I guess, what sort of reason why we have this conversation. But just to tell you a little bit about it, right now it has 300,000 views or more. It has a food justice curriculum that went all the way around the world, really inspiring. Sort of changed a lot of people. Like got pictures of some people in South Africa in correctional facilities or whatever, looking at the video and having our curriculum and actually talking about food as it relates to their health, food in relation to climate change, all these different issues. So I saw the power of media. One thing I was answering the question I was answering when I was making this was, sure, the next connection between food, climate, and health. How do we get health into our communities, communities that are dealing with diabetes, heart disease, violence in general, right? As you can see, I was sort of examining that in a really interesting way. But really, I was always asking myself the question of how do we get to the root of suffering? Sort of like, I don't know, that's the question I was asking, especially growing up in Chicago. I have a preacher in my family, I have pimps in my family, I have Black Panthers in my family, I have the 3 Ps. In my family, straight up. So I've seen it all. I've seen family members overdose. I've seen, a lot of people in my family die from cancers and diet-related diseases, things like that, right, in Chicago. Gangs, all of that stuff. So I grew up in projects in Chicago, right? So, but at the same time, my pops was really interested in education. So he was like, education, exposing you to different things. He was really big on that. So I had this really interesting perspective to be able to go in a lot of different spaces and see a lot of different things and actually see that people are living different lives and there's solutions, but there's no connection point. How do we connect this conversation around genetically modified foods to the corner stores on 85th and International, Oakland, right? So that's what I was trying to do, bridge that gap and actually answer some really big questions in that process. So from Chicago, I ended up going to University of Rochester. Again, exposure, I did music management, created my own major, psychology, double majored in that, and then had a minor in creative writing, president of the concerts committee, had a radio station, was really looking at music for that. I was like, wow, music actually reaches a lot of people. So we did about the Roots, about the Wailers, about a lot of people, and was really working in that front with music. And then from there, I moved to Brooklyn, and I got booted out of Brooklyn after a year. They were like, you need to go to California with that shit, dude. They're like, you're cool, but that's some Cali. I mean, Joe, you know what I'm saying? Joe knows this. So, and I wanted to go to ITP. I wanted to go to Institute of Transpersonal Psychology because I was like, wow, people are looking at something that's evolutionary. I was looking at the connection between psychology and spirituality. Growing up, having experience with my grandfather being a minister and things like that, I did see the power of that to transform people's lives. Something about the energy, not so much sort of the dogma for me, but it was like, wow, there was a point of reality, of an aha moment of experience that I felt. That I experienced in a lot of different religions and spiritual practices in general. And I was like, wow, how do I bring all that together? What is that, right, that people are actually getting transformed by? So I went to Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, studied across religions, across cultures, and I got a master's. Essentially, I studied shamanism, indigenous wisdom, and I studied vibrational therapy, so sound healing, sound and color, right? So I'm looking at the roots of religion through shamanism, and really and it was experiential. So I had to go through my own shit, right? And I'm still going through it, and it's a ever-evolving process. But what was really powerful is that I was actually a taste, again, I had this experience of being able to be exposed to a lot of different things. Like somehow I run into a lot of different healing modalities, healers, shamans from all around the world. So through this experience, I studied, you know, chanting, mantras, the power of the Koto Dhamma, the word sound power, like what that actually does to the physical body, the power of that, right? Sukya Marikari. I'm going to share a little bit of it at the end, but it's a spiritual, it's a karmic reduction practice, right? Like, so it actually reduces spiritual impurities, and it's really amazing for this time. So it's a practice I participate in. Then gratitude is a big part of that too. How do we actually shift karma? So I'm looking at what I started focusing on was karma reduction and changing destinies. How do we actually do that, right? Because again, I asked that big question around suffering, so then I started getting these big answers. And it looks sort of similar. They're starting to rise a lot in the world, and we examined a lot of those here this weekend. Family constellations was big for me, going through family constellations. You know, looking at my own relationships, looking at my mom, my pops doing, you know, marrying twice, right? And I'm like, wow, and I saw myself going down that same route, you know, doing the same thing. So I had to do some family constellations. So there was some biofeedback in my space that I had to examine. Meditation, yoga, obviously, right? It's a science. This stuff is scientific. So I studied that in-depthly. Nature, the whole realm of eco-psychology, you know, so really got deep into that. Soul retrieval, soul cleansing, Tian Gong practices, right? Practices in which actually, you know, be worked without food and water. And actually went through these processes, actually saw, you know, went to the mountaintop, quote unquote, and really saw, you know, some really interesting things about it, the nature of humanity, our space and time right now as humanity in larger cosmos. The contracts that was breached between humanity and cows, for example, right? And why we have mad cow disease and what was actually transferred from that. Why we have bird flu disease based on what was happening with kafus and the factory farms and things like that. And saw like a different perspective, sort of beyond the symptomology. I wanted to go beyond the symptoms and really look at what was going on in the spiritual realm that was causing some of the disease and illness. So it's a little different perspective. But then I started connecting these dots because I see a lot of different dots with the different spiritual practices that have a lot to do with like ancestors, have a lot to do with past lives, if you will, and have a lot to do with stuff that happened before and how now's the opportunity to actually cleanse this stuff on a soul level. So soul cleansing is what I was looking at. Food. So I started working with a lot of people like through detoxing. Food, as you saw. So like folks, so I've done that. I've done like the whole raw food diet and like released a lot of stuff through that. And saw a lot of people dealing with like just addiction. And I started working with a lot of people with addiction through foods. That's why we started SOS Juice, doing the raw food cleansing, the juicing and all that. And particularly in low-income communities and communities of color. Past life regression work, sound and light therapy, right? Went to Psychoacoustic Institute, started studying transducers, frequency medicine, a lot of actually channeled stuff, Atlantean technology, Palladian technology, Starbeam stuff that was sort of downloaded. That was going to be more like in the future, right? But sort of available right now. So long story short, I was exposed to a lot, right? And a lot of different modalities and a lot of different healing practices. But I didn't want to keep that in my mind. So looking at myself as a person who has a journey and an offering to make. And obviously plant medicine, right? So I studied a lot of, like, with ayahuasca, and I studied a lot with the Lakota people, and I studied a lot with, actually still studying, you know, doing a lot of TP ceremonies and working peyote and working with these plant medicines as well. So just getting a lot of information. So that was ITP, Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. From Chicago, went to Brooklyn, went to University of Washington, went to Brooklyn, and then Cali. Finished that, then I went on tour at Base Nectar. I was like, okay, Base Nectar is hitting a lot of people at once. That's amazing. So I'm outreaching a lot of people, right? So from there, I went to Greenfall. Anybody heard of Van Jones? You know Van Jones? So I worked with him. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Because once I got off the hill with Tian Gong and started doing all these, like, it was hard for me to talk to anybody, right? I was completely like, whoa, you know, and I was doing these practices. I was like seeing people's whatever was going on behind them and auric field. It was really sensitive space. And I was like, how do I ground all this universal energy right here in Telegraph, right, in Oakland, right? And I was seeing like the sort of demonic presences and the conversations I was actually having with why there's a dark grid in certain areas in Oakland and what needed to be done with terms of the Oregon societies that need to be created and all these things that was sort of relegated to Marin and sort of these like sort of like these new age spirits, I was actually always the one in that space. I'm like, okay, how do we bring this down to here, right? So working at Greenford, I was like, wow, this is amazing. He's going to deal with climate, unemployment, and it was amazing. It was amazing. Van, obviously, is like a really inspiring individual. Organization was amazing. I was able to be the spotlight organizer. It was a hired assassin, really. That's what you call me. I went around to all these communities all around the country, and I witnessed firsthand, you know, what they're doing in urban agriculture, what they were doing in terms of, was in West Virginia, and was looking at what was going on with that, with the extraction industries. So that was huge. But then from there, I went to Alliance for Climate Education, and I spoke to like at least 135,000 high school students in the Bay Area around climate. And what I ended up focusing on was food, climate, and health. Why? Because food was the most tangible. Sure, we can tell people to click off their light bulbs and this type of thing, but ultimately, everyone could relate to food. Food was that Trojan horse. It was that everyone had a food story, and everybody had something around food that they could relate to. So that was amazing, having that experience of actually being in front of so many people all the time, right? So again, it's just a pattern I'm starting to realize this weekend. I'm like, man, I'm always in front of people and always have an opportunity to synthesize. So again, I was asking this question, how do we get to the root, right? So as I was driving up here, so one thing I did after that, I started working with this organization called Art in Action. Art in Action is working with Science to Violence, and they work with young people in Oakland. So I had direct opportunity to, like, you know, try this stuff out, right? The first time I came in to work on Art in Action, there was a guy named Ozone. Ozone, essentially, I was going to the hospital, the Ozone, with this guy, Galen Peterson, and they were telling me, oh yeah, he has, so what's the deal? It's like, oh, well, he has like 3 or 4 bullets in him, and we don't want him to retaliate, so we're gonna bring music equipment to the hospital, so he doesn't, like, so he can distract himself essentially, and he can like express himself in a different way. So that was Art in Action. We did a retreat right over here at Maya Commerce Ranch, and it let me know, like, wow, the post-traumatic stress that's happening in the hood is really intense, right? And it's really a cyclical thing that's going to continue to happen unless there's some intervention. How do we actually get to the root of that and actually create safe spaces so people can go deeper into that process? So after leaving there, we created United Roots with Will I Am. So we created, it's on 28th and Telegraph right now, and it's like a music studio. And we serve a lot of youth out there. There's like a youth hub incubation out of there as well, so business incubation. And with United Roots, we just music studios and whatnot there as well. So that was United Roots. So we created that. And then one day I actually had this experience in a ceremony, particularly ayahuasca ceremony, and I was like asking this question, I kept asking this question. I was bawling actually, because I was thinking of these political prisoners, I was thinking of Mia Bujama, I was thinking of people in my family, and I was actually crying. It was like, wow, why so much of this, right? What is the solution? Where's the light gonna seep in? And then they were saying, well, particularly for these communities, you have to bring the earth to the people. So I followed directions from that point, and I started creating SOS Juice. So SOS Juice means system out of your system juices. So as I mentioned, we do the food, we work with the food, we do the food, the detoxing, we do the live juicing, we do nutritional education, and have these events. So at these events, they essentially deal with, answer the question of food justice, health equity, and spiritual liberation. The health equity point is like we give people free juicers, free blenders. When we're at the farmer's market and we're selling juice and we're hiring people from the community and people previously incarcerated, we actually, we pay it for it so folks I can actually go to the Black Panther right now, like they're hitting me up all the time, like, yo, we need more of the juice, right? Because people are getting a lot out of it, right? Another thing we do with the juice, we do the chants and all the stuff I've learned, we do that inside of the juice, as you know from like Dr. Emoto, right? This stuff, you know, water, the frequency is held within and the memory is held within that. So we did 25 events of that over the past 2 years, farmers markets, live food demonstrations. We had interviews, Cynthia McKinney, a lot of different people. I pray a lot of people came through the interviews. And then one that really left me going into the space of urban pharmacy was we had Trayvon Trauma and Reconciliation. If you remember the Trayvon Martin situation, there was a, right after that, the verdict came down, they were showing Fruitvale, which is the movie around Oscar Grant, who was fatally shot in Oakland. So in Oakland, at that point, it was on fire at that point. So I was just like, oh, this is crazy. So what we did, we started working with the plants again, and we started doing trauma relief through that, through the juice, through the foods, and we had Trayvon Trauma Reconciliation, a whole meeting for the community to actually have essentially a ceremony in this setting around it, so people can cry and they can get out some of their experiences and actually sort of heal from this and actually have these stories. So that brought me, after having that, I was like, wow, we can't just have a monthly event. We got to have the urban pharmacy. We got to have a healing center. We got to have a space where we connect these dots. Like everything you said, having this sort of vegan cafe, having a retail aspect, selling the food, selling the clothing, selling this energy medicine, the tinctures that we can get hyperlocally, the retail, and actually the art as well, and also have our food sourced through aquaponics, hydroponics in the same space, because we were actually doing that as well on a small scale. So really, all these things I was sort of experiencing, wanted to bring it to a location that was in East Oakland and actually have that decentralized around the country, because I have these connections around the country. So actually put these in and do the work that actually needs to be done and actually ground it in the community, and have a community kitchen around that as well. So that's urban pharmacy, and that's the vision. Essentially having all this in one space, having these energy, these sound healing chambers, right? These things that I experience and offer these to these communities, these family constellations, these people that are going in and out of prison. How do you break that cycle? There's a root to that. Let's not treat the symptoms. Let's go to the root. In the many different ways and points that are pointing to that, let's access that and bring that together, right? So that's the space I'm holding, and that's what I'm holding right now. To end, I'm going to share like a chant from Sukya Marikari, and this is like a spiritual purification chant. And again, it's the Koto Dhamma. And what it is, when people hear this chant, it's really when we do the light for it, it's for your ancestors as well, because a lot of times we're experiencing like financial issues or whatever we're experiencing in this lifetime, relationship issues, and we try to like talk about it from a third dimensional standpoint, but really a lot of this stuff it's happened before, and there's a lot of stories I can talk about in vignettes and scenarios I can walk you through to show you that from so many different cultures, right? So this is Sukya Marikari. And then, so arigato. Gokubiji su gin gin shikai takamanini kamu tamai moe demasu. Gamurigi kamurami no michi karamichite. Bonse to hitonomi yakamu matsu no ikario mikami. Harido no kamu tachi. Moramano no sukagodo tamai no susumiki gari obame karimate. Harikia me misugi tamai te kimi no kono chikara yaminge setamai tomo tsuka no shio. Kashimi mo matsu. Miyama no sumai kario mikami mamri temie saki hai tamae. Gam negra tamai ji hai matse. Gam negra tamai ji hai matse. Arigato.